Hello, and welcome to Change the Face of Yoga, teaching toddlers through golden oldies. I'm very excited to be talking to lots of yoga teachers who will explain their passion for teaching yoga to students with different ages, physical fitness levels, wellness levels, and different goals. They will explain the benefits of yoga for these students and will be including teacher tips and pose modifications. I am Stephanie Cunningham of Yoga Lightness, and I've been teaching over 50s for 10 years. So this area is my passion and the passion of many other yoga teachers that you will be listening to in this series. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get started. This is episode 64 of Changing the Face of Yoga, and my guest is Hersha Chellaram, who exemplifies changing the face of yoga goal. She provides accessible yoga teacher training, and she also provides and is passionate about getting in teachers who also have some disabilities. So she's changing the face of yoga in the student arena and in the teacher arena. Let's listen. Hello, this is Stephanie Cunningham with Changing the Face of Yoga, and I have a really interesting guest today. Her name is Hersha Chellaram, and she is the founder of the YAMA Foundation. It's in Hong Kong, and it's a nonprofit that brings free yoga programs to underserved and vulnerable communities, including people with special needs, disabilities, and chronic illnesses. She also runs a yoga teacher training school, and it specializes in making yoga accessible to different ages and abilities. Welcome, Hersha. Is there anything else you would like to add to that introduction?
Oh, I'm just so excited to be here. One of the latest things I've just started is an online school, which makes it even more accessible for people who can't come all the way to Hong Kong.
We'll talk about that. I'm really interested in this foundation that you've started. Can you tell me a little bit about your journey in yoga and what brought you to do all these wonderful things now?
It's been a very long journey. I was really, really lucky that my dad was my first yoga instructor. He had his teacher training with Integral Yoga by Swami Satchidananda in the 1970s. And so that was my first ever experience of yoga. And I spent many summers at the Satchidananda ashram called Yogaville in Virginia in the US. And that kind of led me to eventually take my teacher training more as a tool for my personal life, not so much because I was set on becoming a yoga teacher. And I took it in my 20s when I was going through what I like to call a mid-20s crisis, where I wasn't sure which direction I wanted to go post-university. And I never looked back. One of the first classes I ever taught was at the Integral Yoga Center in New York City, where I was living and working at the time. And I was just substituting for one of the teachers. As a new yoga teacher, you take any gig that you can get. However, in walked a woman with a wooden leg, and I panicked because I had literally just graduated, and it was all protected and easy when you're doing it in the context of a teacher training, but out there in the real world, it can be very terrifying. Before the class, I walked in and spoke to this lady, and I told her very truthfully, I don't know how to accommodate you in my class. And she looked at me with a smile and she's like, relax, honey. You watch me and I will teach you a thing or two.
Oh, great. I love that.
Yeah, it's so true. And, and I'm talking about not a modern prosthetic like you have these days. It was like a heavy wooden leg,
Whoa.
Kind of like a pirate style. And I could not take my eyes off her the whole class. She practiced so beautifully and modified so flawlessly that she could keep with the pace of the Integral Yoga Basic Hatha 1 class. And that stayed in my mind. It never left me. I've been teaching for about 16 years now. And my yoga journey has taken me through all sorts of people. When you first become a yoga teacher, you just teach anybody that you can teach just to get the experience. But mostly it was people that were older or people that were injured. I went back to Hong Kong for my vacation, and another big yoga client was one of my aunts who was 73 years old at the time and didn't speak much English. And it was not about using complicated cues, but more the most simple things. And she sat in a chair the whole time, and I just made it up as I went along with no experience. And then the next big event that happened in my life was when I was living in Spain and I was married, and my sister-in-law gave birth to her third child. And her third child was born with a rare genetic disease called mitochondrial disease. And the baby's prognosis was quite grim because the doctors, they frankly said to my sister-in-law, "We don't know what to do with your baby. So just take her home and love her, and maybe she'll make it to her first birthday, maybe not," which was really disheartening. My husband's family is actually a family of yogis. So we decided to try yoga in whatever way or form we could with her, mantras and lots of love and lots of cuddles. And she absolutely thrived, much to her medical team's amazement. They would say things like, on paper, she's doing terribly, but looking at her in person, she's doing extremely well. What are you doing? And my sister-in-law and my mother-in-law all gave her all the different non-physical tools of yoga. And of course, I was part of that. And I had a book by Sonia Sumar called Yoga for the Special Child just sitting in my shelf. So I opened it and copied the stuff in that book. And it actually led me to studying with her. And I've been studying with her since 2012. So all these things came together. And this is where I said, I found my passion. And my life brought me back to Hong Kong, where I was born and raised after my father passed away. I figured if I couldn't do it for my niece who is living in Spain, I'd do it for other kids here. And of course, it wasn't just kids that came, it was adults. So that's how it all began.
Wow. And then how did you decide to start the foundation?
Again, in Hong Kong, you're starting in a brand new city, completely from ground zero. So I started to offer my services to anybody who would take my services, because it's very, very specialized. Yoga for people with disabilities or special needs, it's something that's not very well known. And there was a lot of, "Oh, no, we don't know what that is," or, "Oh, that's really funny. Yoga, I'm in a wheelchair. That's kind of a joke." And I was really, really determined, because even one of the moms who actually happened to give me, she had a little bit of faith in me, and she said, "Listen, I've tried everything with my son who has autism and another rare genetic disease. Let's give yoga a try. Good luck. He I can't get him to put socks on command, so I have no idea how he's going to do yoga." And so I started with these small gigs, and I taught everywhere for free, just so that I could prove myself that this worked, to the point where I was a bit broke and burnt out. So I figured, okay, there has to be another way, because now it was gaining some traction and everybody wanted a taste of it, but they wanted it for free. It wasn't taken seriously enough to pay for it. So that's when I started YAMA Foundation, as a way to raise some money and be able to cover the basic expenses of covering these programs where the end user gets it for free. And then came the idea of, well, I can't do this by myself. And so Hersha Yoga became, well, it's Hersha Yoga because I'm Hersha and I do yoga. That's the only reason why it's called that way. But I created this school of teacher training with the tradition of integral yoga. I became an authorized trainer from that tradition and lineage, and an accessible yoga trainer and a prenatal yoga trainer, and I'm program host for Yoga for the Special Child. So I have this whole set of offerings that can train people to work with any age and any ability. Every year we do a 200-hour and a few continuing education or specialized trainings that allow people to go into the community. And I do a work exchange program. So if somebody can't afford a teacher training, I'll give them a scholarship based on the premise that they'll do some work for YAMA Foundation pro bono. But if they don't, I can actually raise some money and pay to support the yoga community so that they can support the wider underserved community in this way, if that makes any sense.
I understand. I was looking at your website and you said that you help schools to put proposals, I assume to the government, although I don't really know, to bring yoga into the schools. You're actually helping people who normally wouldn't even get the opportunity from yoga by also looking at the funding end of it.
Yeah, so this is, I mean, obviously funding is the hardest thing. We're very, very lucky that Hong Kong does have a very wealthy portion of the population. And this wealthy population is extremely generous. One of the things that I found out with YAMA, part of the reason why I help other nonprofit organizations and charities get the funding is because Hong Kong has a rigorous process of making there's different levels of charity. So right now, YAMA Foundation is a nonprofit seeking charitable status. And the application process is really long. That's a whole other story right there. What we found is that if we can help the actual charities get the funding from the foundations that award grants, and yoga is kind of a new thing, yoga for people with disabilities, oh, that sounds really interesting. So we help them get that funding. And when they get that funding, then we can use it to give transportation scholarships, buy yoga mats, and pay the teachers to go out and be there. And the reason why I want to pay the teachers to go out and be there is so that they get a very professional program that has consistency and high standards in the teachings. One thing I learned early on was that volunteers are not always consistent. You can't always rely on volunteers because they're just volunteering their time. So if you have a teacher that's committed to a program, they have to sign a contract to commit to that entire program. And we always have at least 2 people committed to a program so that if one teacher can't be there, the other one can. And then we do a research component. So that's why when we create these proposals, I'm really, really hoping that the community here takes this service seriously, because it's accessible yoga, but it does have a therapeutic element to it. Yeah, and so if we help them find the funding, then they don't have to worry about, oh, will you just do it for free and relying on volunteers. They can actually get a very professional service.
I've noticed on your website that you actually had a picture of a group of people who I assume were, I think it said they were the teachers or they were part of the YAMA Foundation. So do you have a group of teachers that work solely for you?
So most of the teachers I hire are freelance because the programs are not full-time. Nobody works full-time teaching for me. So the teachers are people in the wider yoga community that come in. And based on their qualifications and their experience, they say, listen, I want to help and I want to do some good. Then I'll match whatever qualifications they have with the appropriate community or population that we're serving. So we have a bunch of people that are kids yoga trained. And so we'll give them the basics that they need of working with kids with different abilities. Usually, if they don't have that special qualification, we'll send them into Hong Kong's poorer neighborhoods where the kids are more physically abled, but they just come from rough circumstances. And so a kids yoga program is more appropriate for them. However, I do have a handful, about 5 to 8, that have been working with me for a long time. So they now are starting to get more senior roles in the foundation. So one is now going to coordinate all the other programs and be kind of the lead teacher and mentor for the new teachers coming in. And this one person has been the first student I ever had when I ever gave a teacher training. So she's been with me now 8 years. And then there's another one who was translating for me while I was teaching at the Ronald McDonald House Charities, which houses children who have terminal illness and cancer. And I didn't speak the local language. I have a basic proficiency in Cantonese, but some of the people in that house also speak Mandarin. So I needed somebody to come and translate. And that person who came just to translate is now one of my best top teachers. And she also has a personal story and history of having a family member with special needs. So now I sent her to all the Chinese speaking programs. So she's kind of the top person in the local community that teaches children with special needs and adults with disabilities. So with this handful, it's more that they've been with YAMA Foundation for a long time, so they're starting to get more permanent roles. But we're still really young. We're only actually 2 years old officially.
Okay, I thought it was older than that. That's
no,
amazing.
It's brand new. It's completely brand new, and a lot of it was learning before it was an official entity. It's only been an official entity since 2016.
You've done an amazing amount in just 2 years to have all of these things available. I'm really impressed. You said you have a school of yoga teacher training and that it specializes in making yoga accessible to different ages and ability. Now, I am a 500 level teacher, and really those kind of people with different ages and abilities really weren't addressed very much in any of those trainings. And I'm wondering, what kinds of things are you adding to your training to help people who know they're going to be working with people with special needs?
So the 200-hour program I offer is actually Integral Yoga's 200-hour program. And Integral Yoga has an academy that's based in the US, but they have trainings in over 30 countries around the world. And I'm one of the younger teacher trainers, but that 200 hours focuses on the foundation of asana. And when you have a very, very strong foundation, which is the absolute basics of an asana, you can either turn it into more advanced poses, or you can break down those poses into adaptations and modifications. So I'm literally just following the lineage that I studied with. And the Teachers Council at Integral Yoga have created the curriculum that is naturally very accessible and more targeted towards beginners who are starting their yoga journey for the first time. And it's not just the physical side of yoga. They also focus on 5 additional branches in addition to the Hatha yoga. So they cover karma yoga, which is the yoga of selfless service and right action. Bhakti yoga, which is more of a devotional component, whether it's religious or non-religious. They have Jnana yoga, which is the yoga of wisdom, the path of self-analysis. Japa yoga, which is the yoga of mantra repetition or positive affirmations. I'm missing one. And then Raja yoga, which is mindfulness, meditation, and ethical conduct. They combine it in a very integrated way that makes it very accessible, because the way they say a person practices yoga, it's not always going to be physical all the time. There are different ways that you can approach a yoga life that goes beyond just a physical body. So if you have a strong foundation in these 6 branches of integral yoga, you've got more tools in your pocket to teach yoga to somebody who might not be so physically abled. And then beyond the 200-hour is the 500-hour, and that combines the Raja Yoga teacher training, which is in-depth study of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali and the 8-limbed path of yoga, and the intermediate. So then you've got a very strong foundation to teach Hatha yoga to the general population. But if you are adapting, then I have Yoga for the Special Child, which is a 95-hour kids yoga training program. And that is Sonia Sumar's program. And I host her to come to Hong Kong every year to visit and mentor and guide us along as all of the teachers in Hong Kong, start working with kids with different abilities. And this addresses infants all the way up to the age of 18, kids with things like Down syndrome, autism, ADD, ADHD, cerebral palsy. And a lot of the children that we invite to come and see Sonia Sumar, there are a lot of them with rare diseases or physical symptoms that we've not really heard about or seen before. And she is literally magic when she works with kids. And so we learn from her. I'm still learning from her every year. hopefully, fingers crossed, one day I'll be able to be a trainer for her program. But let's see, it's now from that stage, it's more about learning and sharing. And then I've got Jivana Heyman's Accessible Yoga, which is actually it's a new movement that's growing quite rapidly in the US. And he and I worked on a totally separate project. And I spoke to him about YAMA Foundation, and he told me about his accessible yoga training. And there was so much synergy there that I asked him if he would consider me to be a trainer for his program, which he gladly accepted. And I didn't have to write a training program from scratch, because he's also integral yoga trained, and everything that he created out of his accessible yoga program was everything I was planning to put together anyway. So I have a worldwide network of people that have been doing this. It's not something that I do kind of just on my own. And this is what I think makes a big difference.
Any connection that you need to explore, you probably have some experts to go to. So I think that's a great way to start. I did want to talk about just one thing, because I noticed it in the just one sentence, I think, and then you mentioned it about mentoring new teachers.
Ooh, I think this is just a value add that I give without any remuneration. If I see a yoga teacher is very dedicated to a certain cause, but they're new or uncertain, sometimes I'll just go in and do the program with them or alongside them. As an assistant, they kind of are the main teacher, and I'll come in and just assist, and then give them some tools on how they can enhance their teaching, or how they can connect with a student better, or if something didn't go so well, we brainstorm some ideas, because there's a lot of well-intentioned people that have basic qualifications but not enough specialized qualification or experience in working. So the whole mentoring thing is they can absolutely come on in as a volunteer to watch and assist, and then the program leader or the head teacher will teach them through example. So the volunteers come, help in, watch, learn, and then we also always encourage them to get trained. So we always send in a highly qualified teacher to be the program leader, and then equally qualified person to be a program assistant. And then beyond those two, we welcome volunteers to come in and help out as well.
Because I teach seniors, and so I was very concerned about how I was going to do that. So I really congratulate you on that. That's a wonderful thing, and I'm sure it really helps people, especially when you're facing people who might need some special adaptations and things.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I just remember my wooden leg experience, the lady with the wooden leg. And I was so scared. I was like, I'm going to fail at this. This is horrible.
I understand that perfectly when you have older people who go, oh, no, I can't get down on the floor. Okay, well, let's do something different then. I was really fascinated by your accessible pregnancy yoga. As I said before, I have known women who did have very difficult pregnancies, and that they would need some special yoga. And you say this is a new adventure for you, a new venture in your YAMA Foundation. So can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so YAMA Foundation hasn't yet started a community outreach program for pregnancy, but we have some local organizations that we're talking to now, simply because there haven't been enough prenatal yoga teachers that I've personally trained in this. The Accessible Prenatal Yoga is a brand new program that I created. And the first time I offered the training, I was actually visiting my family in Spain. And so they organized it almost like a beta test for me to try it out. So I had only done it in 2016 for the first time. And I came back to Hong Kong, and I've been doing smaller trainings with just really, really small groups of students because I'm still testing it out. It's actually the first training I created that doesn't jump on the back of another school or tradition. So again, a little terrified about it. And that's why I'm kind of doing it in these small kind of pockets and groups of people, because the feedback that I get is really, really exciting. And it was born based on, again, another yoga class that I was teaching. And this is before I went straight into disabilities and special needs. I was teaching prenatal yoga. at a local center in Hong Kong. And I had, most of them were regular or seasoned yoga practitioners that were familiar with yoga, and then they got pregnant. But there were the one or two that walked in that had some serious pregnancy issues, like varicose veins to the point where their entire lower legs were swollen and bruised.
Oh.
And I remember this one student walked in, and she looked at me, and she looked very terrified when she came up to me, and she said, "I'm 44 and I'm pregnant." And I thought my days of getting pregnant were over, so I never actually planned to have a baby. I've had to quit smoking. I have a titanium leg because I've had a motorcycle accident. I am not fit. I'm not flexible. I'm really frightened. Can you help me?
Oh, wow.
And I've never done yoga before.
Oh, yes. Okay. That would be frightening. It really would.
And of course, she came into this class where I knew everybody and everybody was a seasoned yoga practitioner. It was all very easy. And I sat her down in a chair because she couldn't get up and down from the floor. And I put a chair, I set up a separate mat area for me at the front of the class with a chair. And I taught a very slow and steady class that accommodated her in a chair. And the people who knew what they were doing, luckily, the people already knew what they were doing. But it was a different kind of class. And I feel that the regular yoga practitioners were able to go very, very deep in their bodies. And because the cues that I was giving to the whole class, but targeting this beginner in a chair, it actually enhanced their entire experience. And that's when the idea for Accessible Prenatal was born. That there must be a lot of women out there that actually can use yoga. What if a woman is on bed rest and she can't get out of bed? There's so many other tools of yoga that she can do to feel better. And after my second child, I had joint instability in my hip. The doctor said, no yoga for 1 year. I was kind of stubborn. I did yoga, but I was looking and researching different aspects of Pilates and yoga therapy and physiotherapy, and kind of saying, well, that's yoga anyway, because there's a lot of crossover if you think about it in a lot of these disciplines. And so I took the practices that were very clearly a yoga practice and developed it and put some of that postnatal rehabilitation as part of the accessible yoga training for pregnant women to hopefully avoid the mistakes I made with my body. And I was a bit of a hypochondriac pregnant lady. I mean, I had everything that could go wrong: bleeding gums, bleeding nose, swollen feet, diastasis recti, varicose veins. I mean, you name it, I had it. But I was active, I was mobile, I was doing yoga every single day. I look at my pregnancies as very joyful, wonderful experiences. But in hindsight, I was like, wow, I actually had a lot of these issues. This is, the Accessible Prenatal is me bearing my soul. It's part live and part online. So the people who want to take it online and they just want it as a continuing ed, they have the ability to do that. And I've threaded pictures of me throughout my pregnancies, just bearing it all.
Let's just segue into that. You were saying earlier that you were excited about some of your trainings or some parts of your trainings going online. So talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, so this is something that's completely brand new. I've been thinking about taking my courses online. I have two cousins that one lives in St. Martin and one lives in Sri Lanka. And a year and a half ago, both of them were pregnant. And they had emailed me, Hersha, can you send me some videos of prenatal yoga so I can practice at home? To which I said, well, why don't you find a prenatal yoga teacher in your area? Don't you think that would be much easier? And they came back and they said, yeah, well, we've gone to some classes, but Hersha, we just trust you to keep us safe. And I was like, oh, okay, let me think about it. But of course, I was so unprepared for the world of teaching online. Filmed a couple of videos, sent them a few things. And then I started, okay, this is a whole field that I need to learn about. So I've spent the last year kind of learning about it, looking at different platforms. I had no idea about email courses and drip content and podcasts. So this is what I've been doing in my spare time. is just learning it from ground zero. And so I've just launched, beginning of July, I just launched the online portion of the accessible prenatal yoga training, which I've got, and I'm doing a live training alongside that with a small group of women. So they're testing it out for me and giving me a lot of really useful feedback. It's just a soft launch, but it is available if some people want to check it out. If you Google accessible prenatal yoga, it should come up on your search feed. I hope it comes up on your search feed. And otherwise, it'll be featured on my...
Well, we'll give people all those contact details. Yeah. I do know that there is accessible prenatal yoga on your website, so it should come up on that.
Oh, yeah.
Because I read that. I haven't ever heard of this before, which isn't exactly a reason to say it's brand new and nobody else has ever done it, but I do think it's a really interesting idea. I've had people on who have done prenatal yoga. They're helping people, but it sounds like it's kind of normal pregnancies without a lot of problems. And I think this would be just an excellent resource for people who, because you never know, you can be perfectly healthy and then have a pregnancy that just has a lot of difficulties. I really congratulate you for putting that on it. I think that's a great idea. I really do. Yeah. And I'll make sure that everybody knows how to get a hold of you, contact you. So if they want to get involved with that, because I know there's a lot of prenatal teachers. I'm in Australia, even though I am originally from the U.S., and I know there's a lot of prenatal teachers here, but I haven't heard about anything as detailed as yours is.
Well, thank you. Another thing that's quite interesting is through the work with YAMA Foundation. Like I said, we're in talks with an organization that actually helps teenage pregnancies or women who have been violated and they're going to have their babies but give the babies up for adoption. And if you actually look at the World Health Organization statistic, it says 1 out of 3 women have had some sort of abuse or violation. And if you think about it in the context of a prenatal yoga class, that's potentially 1/3 of your class. Again, trauma awareness and trauma sensitivity plays a huge role in prenatal yoga. You can't always presume that it's a happy picture.
Yes, excellent point. I've done a lot of podcasts about trauma, people having different ideas and different ways and all of that. I hadn't thought that pregnancy could also be, or at least the start of the pregnancy could be a traumatic issue also, but you're right. Mm-hmm. That's quite true. I watched a little video on your website and I loved it. It was a young woman in a wheelchair. And and that it was just a lovely, it was only 10 minutes or so. It was a lovely practice that she had an assistant that helped her through it. But she did look quite happy at the end, as if it really had made a difference. And I got the impression that maybe she's being kind of a role model for your YAMA Foundation.
Yes, I take Katrin with me everywhere. She is an official ambassador for YAMA Foundation. I take her to all my public talks. She has to use a communication board that she chooses words with her eyes, or she has a computer that she makes sentences with her eyes and then the computer will speak on her behalf. But because I'm very talkative, when she comes with me, she's like, you just talk. It's fine. But a lot of the times we go and together we communicate the message that if she can do yoga, anybody can do yoga. And we created that video because she's actually in Australia right now at the Isaac conference. And she was selected to give a presentation for other people living with cerebral palsy on how they stay healthy and, physical, emotional, mental well-being. We filmed that together for her presentation. And she said, okay, well, if somebody wants to access this video outside of this conference, how can we do that? So we put it on the YouTube channel, we put it on the YAMA Foundation website. I've just basically put it everywhere where everyone can find it. It's so sweet, and it's something that I'm so proud that she's doing because she was very shy when I first met her.
Every once in a while you get that smile from her. You can tell that it's really something that she enjoys doing. And so I just wanted to point that out, that people should go look at that because it's a lovely one.
People should look at that. And it's the assistant there is me.
Oh, is it? Oh,
Kat,
okay.
Yeah, it is. That's me. Kat and I have such a wonderful friendship. And she is an incredible young lady who is going to change the world one person at a time.
I've been working on another podcast about purpose, and I was thinking she has wonderful purpose in her life because, or with this yoga, and yet one may not exactly expect that from someone who has those different abilities like she does. I just thought it was a really warm, wonderful thing, and I just wanted to bring it up so that people might go and look at that.
This is something I'm hoping that YAMA Foundation can also be a platform for, so that it's not just physically abled yoga teachers out in the community, but also people with disabilities or different abilities are out there teaching yoga as well.
I was going to talk about that. That's one of your goals, is to have different ability people also teaching yoga. Actually, a lot of yoga teachers seem to be very talented athletes. And I think this is a really new take on what yoga teacher can be.
Absolutely. It's about changing the way, I mean, this is your whole podcast, changing the face of yoga. If you look at the way yoga is marketed, it is based on athletic ability. And kudos to all those yoga teachers that are able to hold these advanced and beautiful yoga poses, because in no way would I ever want to bring a yogi down. Diversity in yoga and in media is something that's needed if we want to make it more accessible.
So when you do your teacher training, and do you have people that come in with different abilities and teach them to be teachers?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I haven't had a person so far with a physical disability become a teacher, but a lot of people come in and they say, I've been practicing yoga for years. I've been practicing meditation for years. I cannot touch my toes. I have this back problem and that back problem. I just want to take a 200-hour for myself just to deepen my studies. Do you think I'm okay to come into your teacher training? And of course, I say yes. And then when they graduate, I don't let them go away. I tell them, you have to teach now. And a lot of them are so terrified at that thought. But really what I'm hoping is people who have disabilities come and do the training. In September, I'm doing Jivana Heyman's accessible yoga training. So Katrin, I'm forcing her to do that one. And I have a couple of other students and people that I've met in the community that I'm really trying to encourage them to come and take the training too.
We're talking about the media and the version of yoga that everybody thinks they know about. But I think that would be wonderful to have teachers that are modifying for their own different abilities as well as for the students. And I love that idea that anybody can be a yoga teacher.
That's true. It's very true. And the whole premise behind this is to just help people find their tribe and find a place where they feel like they belong. And that's the essence of yoga as well. Your yogis, your sangha, your community, that becomes such a huge part of your emotional and social well-being as well.
I noticed with teaching seniors that a lot of, especially the older seniors, a lot of what they loved about the yoga class was the social interaction, because we'd often have tea before or after, or, have a lunch every once in a while.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. When I was living in Spain for a few years, I taught the retired British community that had settled in Spain. And this is exactly what we did. We'd go for coffee. It was like yoga and coffee was just the activity. Mm-hmm. Everybody came for coffee after, and we would have outings or retreats or lunches. And really this helped because a couple of them became widowed during the time I was there. And the sense of community that they had to get through it was really fantastic.
I don't think people understand that for some populations, probably all populations, the social interaction of being with other people and yet being concentrated on your own body but not competing is very valuable. Yeah.
So it's so nice to hear that you're doing the yoga and the teas and the lunches. It's that to me is developing the community and the sangha, which is a yoga practice in itself.
True, it is. Okay, well, is there anything that we haven't covered that you would really like to talk about?
Oh my gosh. I love, well, I mean, I know this podcast was to interview me, but I hope that we can talk and share more, because what you're doing is absolutely amazing. And this podcast is absolutely amazing. And I'm just so excited that there's like-minded people around the world that are looking to share this message that yoga really is for everyone. So thank you. I'm so grateful.
You're welcome. I love showcasing the stories of these wonderful, compassionate yogis and yoga therapists. It's just amazing what people are doing. I am very surprised. I think you're about the fourth or fifth person that has a nonprofit to provide yoga to people who are disadvantaged in many ways, but definitely don't have a lot of money to take yoga classes. And I had no idea. And this is from all around the world. I've had people in Europe and UK and all over doing this. And I think I'm kind of wondering if this is a new way to do yoga, because there does seem to be an emphasis on the big yoga companies and making money, whereas a lot of yoga people are going in slightly different directions. And I think that needs to be said.
It's important to share it. I mean, yoga classes can be quite expensive depending on where you are in the world. Very expensive in Hong Kong. At the same time, I look at a lot of the yoga teaching community, and a lot of full-time yoga teachers are also struggling, which is why YAMA, and that's exactly why YAMA Foundation was set up, to say, no, I am going to pay you as a yoga teacher because your time is important. So if you can commit to the whole program and you have the right qualifications and the right insurance and all of that, then we will definitely pay you for your time. And I feel that's really important too, because the stronger yoga community you have that's happy and healthy and abundant, the more resources you have to share with those who are less fortunate.
And it also says that there is value, commercial value, we'll go with that. We all know there's other kinds of value in yoga, and being a yoga teacher, that it is something that is valued by the community. And I think that's important too, because I admire people that volunteer their time. I'm really impressed that you make it a goal that they be paid for their yoga teaching.
Absolutely. And I do my service for YAMA Foundation once a week, every Monday. And even though I do a lot of the background stuff and the admin behind the scenes, the other times of the week, I've kind of set that boundary that, okay, Monday morning is as much admin and work that I can get done for the foundation. Monday afternoon, I'm actually there teaching. But then Tuesday through Saturday, it's all Hersha yoga stuff, so that Hersha Yoga's profits can actually feed into YAMA Foundation to keep it financed. I have to live, and one has to feed the other.
Well, this has been a wonderful interview, Hersha. I'm so glad that you agreed to be on. I thank you. This was a great one. You've really brought up some very different points that we haven't ever had on the podcast before. So I want to thank you for those too.
Thank you so much. So I hope we stay in touch, and I am definitely coming to Australia at some point.
Oh, well, good.
So
Look me up.
I hope I will get to meet you face to face.
That sounds great. Now, I wanted to let you all know how to get in contact with Hersha. She has a Facebook.com is YAMA Foundation. It's YAMA. It's all one word. She also has her own, which is Hersha Yoga, and HERSHA Yoga.
My website is hershayoga.com, HERSHA yoga, one word, .com. And you can find everything there, access to absolutely everything from there. And also YAMA Foundation is YAMA, YAMA, HK.org. HK stands for Hong Kong. So YAMAHK.org.
And if you would like to email Hersha, her email is Hersha, HERSHA, at hershayoga.com. I think that Hersha has many different things and unique things to offer. With her new online courses, she can spread that wonderful knowledge and teaching around the world.
Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Thank you for that wonderful interview. If you would like to be a guest on Changing the Face of Yoga, please go to my website, www.yogalightness.com.au, and under the Changing the Face of Yoga tab, you can complete Be Our Guest form. After reviewing the form and finding it applicable to this podcast, we will send you a link to schedule an interview. Please download, review, and tell your friends of any podcasts that are of interest to you and to them. If you would like to contact me, send an email to info@yogalightness.com.au. And thank you for listening to Changing the Face of Yoga.